age and different other ages. I just probably need to make it just like tape into it, you know what I mean? Yes, yeah, 'cause we battle with the lions quite often.
And you write down your schedule, fix it, Johnson, and we'll agree. That we
Do you need another mic?
We are here.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
Just to get the recording started.
Okay, perfect.
Why need here? We had a release.
Jerry, do you have a sign?
Just have to go.
Hello, this is Ann Chappelle. I just wanted to test my microphone in case.
So it's not.
Can you guys hear me okay? I can hear you. Okay, thank you.
Okay, we're going to get started. Thank everybody for taking the time today to participate in this month's LEPC meeting. We'll call the order. 12:03. Has everybody had a chance to review the minutes from the last meeting that was sent out? Get up. Last meeting.
Prior American Red Cross, I think we approved the minute.
There's a second.
I'll second.
Seven. All rules. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion passed. Gary, Frank, report.
The current LEPC bank balance is $49,071.28. We have several pending items. The uniform solutions for the vest for the sheriff's office, $11,277.28. We went ahead and got the last or the final invoice on that. We're making the payment. So that should come out soon. The health and safety fair, we'll bring that up here in a little bit on the $2,000 allocation for that. And then pending the city of order for the gas tech air monitor, $1,080.83. I believe that did arrive. And we're just waiting for the invoice for the sale.
Any on the best? Any word on the best?
The vests have been ordered.
Okay, they have been ordered, good.
I guess to get.
So the vests have been ordered and we're just waiting to, or we paid the invoice, we're just waiting for that to clear.
Yeah. The next item on the agenda is the compliance report, Gary.
Compliance report, we received one emissions event from Phillips 66 and one follow-up event from New Street. Well, we have here to the death, if anybody wants to take a look.
Next year. Alan, anything on right now?
Nothing we were out to know at this moment.
Okay. Public education? Or anything?
What's the date for this health fair?
Which one was this?
We just had one.
No, the one that we're taking action on today, we need
That was the one that we just had. We're taking action. on
Taking
it.
care.
Yes.
the Family Day, DAYC. Okay, cool. Yeah. I was dubious about how useful it was going to be to demonstrate hands-on CPR. But strangely enough, we had a few people come through, including a family of 5. And they seem to have gotten quite a bit out of having it demonstrated for them. And being reminded that when they call 911, the person there will be able to walk them through it, even if they forget. And we also had a good deal of interest from the public about the Sound the Alarm campaign and the fact that the local fire departments were working with the Red Cross on installing smoke detectors. And they acted like this was a great revelation to them. So apparently we need to get the word out a little bit more than we have so far that this is available. Anyway, I don't have anything else to report, and thank you all for the opportunity to work with you.
Thank you, Warren.
We happen to know how many people actually came to Family Day.
The question is number in attendance. Bill, do you have a rough number?
There were 250 that had bracelets, but we're very sure that that number was over 500. Now,
Okay, so over 500. Very good. Thank you.
You do. Bill, Josie, anything else you want to present on the safety things?
I guess I will say that from the feedback that we received, we handed out participant feedback. And all those forms were very positive, very encouraging. Everyone said, hey, we want to come back. This is a great event for us. We didn't know how that would be and what kind of turnout would result. And they were all blown away. So I think everyone had a great time. Everyone that I talked to that came to the event really enjoyed it and found it to be very useful. So I think it was a success, and we're excited about hearing those things.
Good deal. Thank you guys for all the time you put in on that. I know it took a lot of effort, a lot of time to do that. Heard a lot of good things in the community and everything about that. What we presented, which those good words. Chief Galloway, anything on
I don't have anything to do with it.
thank you, Chief. All right, we have some donations. Okay, we have some donations that were made specifically to be used for the safety fair. So we'll need to vote to accept those. One is for $500. One is $500 from Pantex, another $500 from Education Credit Union, and then $175.81 from from the bill. So we just need to and $250 from the Kiwanis. So
Two part really accepted in a separate motion to apply to that or just one motion.
I make a motion to accept the donations for the safety fair.
Okay, second,
Second motion.
all those in favor? Any opposed? Okay, so then we'll do a separate, vote to apply those funds into, our account to be used for the expenses of the safety fair. It's dispersed to reimburse. Okay, and then we also will disperse those in to also reimburse, out of pocket for, Bill Shelton.
Yeah, so the project donation total was $1,675.81, and the reimbursable amount due to bill is $2,000. So do this as one motion to accept the money into the LEPC, or I'm sorry, we've already accepted it, to apply that into our balance, and then also to reimburse Bill for the expenses that were created as a result of the safety fair.
So moved.
Motion,
Second.
have a second, all in favor?
Any opposed? All right, motion passed. All right, Chief Smith, anything on emergency response? We did have PNR came in and did some training this last week with local emergency responders and their group here. It's 2-day training. We did a tabletop. It was great training. It's good. Again, I know there are border complexes out there. It was a good training opportunity with PNR. Good relationship building. All right. Unfinished business. So we have on the schedule, we have an update on Tokai Apartments.
Yes, yes, we're here.
If we could have you come up closer to the podium, that'd be awesome. That way, it's behind you, you can kind of step outside, whatever. Comfortable for you.
Good morning, everyone. Santiago Hernandez, Vice President of Human Resource for Tokai Apartment. But I think some new things which is always great. It's always great to have an engagement in some meetings. So we thought that since we do have some new faces in the crowd, why don't we give a little bit of a summary as to where we are, and then we'll give, of course, any time to answer any questions that I'm sure you may have. So of course, we want to thank the opportunity to address the community and the guidance and the leadership that TCQ and the LEPC has always provided to us during the past 4 months, and that we have been dealing with this issue. And again, just a summary. So in September 2021, we installed at the Burger plant, we installed a pollution control system to meet some of the requirements from the EPA. And basically, this system was designed to control 2 critical pollutants, the sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxide. So we're thrilled to say that the system is actually doing what it's supposed to do, which is control, reduce those pollutants, and we actually reduced by 90% since we actually installed it. So one of the byproducts of that, it was unintended byproduct of that, is that you see a very visible stack that it's very visible, right? And so one of the things that we're working on is to how to address that visible stack. So first of all, understand what it is, what's it composed of, right? What are some of the health effects it has in the community? And of course, how do we reduce it? How do we eliminate it, right? And so that's what we've been working with the LEPC, the TCQ, to keep them informed as far as what we're doing. And so, like I said, the system is doing what it's supposed to do, which is reduce those pollutants, right? But we have the stack. So first of all, we want to understand what is it. So we brought a third party to first understand what it is. And so now we know that it's a sulfuric acid mist. Right. And so we also know, and Dr. Chappelle is here. I believe some of you who were here last month heard from her that the composition, the emissions that we have coming from that stack actually doesn't exceed any of the standards from Texas, right? And so one of the things that we want to do now is, okay, so how do we reduce, how do we eliminate that? So we're working with the equipment manufacturer, Hutchinson, to make sure that we come in and we understand, as far as inside the unit, how do we go in and make sure that we understand what are some of the things that maybe not working well? We've done some external inspections, and so far we've done what we could as far as externally in the unit. But now we need to understand what's happening inside. And so maybe in the past couple of weeks, the past couple of days, and last week, you have seen that there isn't a stack coming from the plant. Right, and that's because we have shut down the unit to understand, again, to go inside the unit and make sure we understand what are some of the issues. So right now we have scheduled, the manufacturer of the equipment is scheduled to be on site on next week, so on May 31st. They're going to be here, we're going to go in and we're going to analyze everything that's going on. Now, that is the next step that we have in this process, right? Of course, we're going to continue keeping the TCQ, the LEPC informed as to what's going on. But we want you to know that this is not a matter of us not investing, not caring. Absolutely not. This is, we're deeply committed to the community. We're deeply committed to being a good neighbor. Right? We want to be a good steward of the environment. And that's actually what we're trying to do right now. This is not a matter of investing in this situation. We have invested. We'll continue to invest until we resolve the issue to a successful resolution. Right. And so that is what we have right now. We are addressing the situation with the equipment manufacturer. So we will have another update once we actually go into the unit and see what's going on. But I'm sure you have some questions, right? So we're here. We have a few folks from the plant, my manager, of course, a few of our folks who have been with the plant for a number of years, myself, right? To make sure that we always are transparent and open in anything that we're doing, right? So the last thing we want to do is, again, we install the equipment. Very proud to say that we have reduced pollutants, so it's very good, right? We understand that I understand, I will be too, right? I'll be concerned as well. But we're here to answer any other questions that you may have. And so with that, please, if you have any questions, by all means, let us know. And Dr. Ann, I'm not sure if you have a material that you want to present to the team today. If you do have something, please, share with the team. If not, then we can continue with any questions that the team here may have.
Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Awesome. Better than what my kids can hear. So as they said, my name is Ann Chappelle. I'm a board certified toxicologist, and I've been working as a toxicologist in the industrial chemical industry and more recently the pharmaceutical industries for over 25 years. And I want to thank the leadership of Tokai for engaging me. I work for SafeBridge Regulatory and Life Sciences Consulting. I'm a third party to Tokai. And my job here is really to help interpret some of the data that we've seen to understand what some of your main concerns are and to do my best to provide answers for your questions. I personally live up in the Philadelphia area, and I don't live that far from the Marcus Hook refinery, from the Philadelphia refineries. I'm in also an area where there is a lot of manufacturing, and I know what it's like when I drive by on my way to the grocery store to see something coming out the stack and wondering if it's, is that steam? Is that something else? So I'm glad that you guys have this forum that you can ask and have these questions addressed. As he said, I have provided last month a presentation, and I spoke to you all about that. The one question that I did get back was around, what are the long-term adverse effects of exposure to sulfuric acid mists? And so I have prepared a written response to that. I'm not sure if that's been fully distributed yet, but I have provided a written response. If you'd like for me to discuss that, I do have a slide or two, not a lot, but if that's still something you'd like for me to address, I would be happy to. And I encourage you all again, if you have questions, to send them to any of the Tokai leadership. And I will do my best to make sure I get it addressed and get you an answer back.
Thank you, Dr. Chappelle. I think it will be good if you present your material.
What did you want?
Yeah, present the material. You said you.
Okay,
Great, so yes, that'd be great.
let's see. I think I can share my screen. Okay, move this out of the way. So I'm not going to start from the beginning, but what I've done is I've appended some of these slides to the end and updated the title page to say that that this is a revised version. So I want to go back and just remind everybody that there are standards for sulfuric acid mists. The first of all is that the EPA does not regulate sulfuric acid mists as sulfuric acid mists. They actually regulate it under their particulate matter standard, which is at 12 micrograms per meter cube. That's their annual average for that. And they do that because the sulfuric acid mist, it's a mist, it's small droplets, and those converge with the other droplets and particulate matter in the air, combustion products from other sources into an overall particulate matter standard or value, I guess you would say. So there's more than one way to regulate sulfuric acid mists. TCEQ does have its own standard, separate standard for sulfuric acid mist emissions. And these are listed here on the screen. I'm not sure if you can see me wiggling around my mouse, but I presented this before. So when you're thinking about what these long-term effects are, you notice here they've got the 24-hour average and a 1-hour maximum. And the reason that they do that is because the amount of tissue damage that these mists and these acids can cause, it really depends on the strength and the concentration of the acid, as well as the length of exposure. So, when you're thinking about community air, you're thinking about, again, that 24-hour average, that daily average that you don't want to exceed. So the adverse effects of many of these mists, it's the same that you would find for some of these, for any of these other acids that you might find out in the, that are used in different industrial and medical kind of uses. And that's because when acids react with water, it's a violent reaction, and it's when it reacts, it releases heat, and that heat and the physical action of that corrosive material can also cause tissue damage. So if you were going to breathe an acid mist, if you're going to get it in your eyes, on your nose, that's where it's going to find the greatest damage, because those are really moist type tissues. So again, the kinds of adverse effects you see with sulfuric acid mists, just like any of the other acids that you might end up being around. I've presented this slide previously, that the negative health impacts from breathing sulfuric acid mists, they are seen in the respiratory system primarily because that's its first line of defense. And so it's the damage that you tend to get with these mists is the systemic inflammation that they can cause. So when you breathe it in, you experience symptoms shortly after you breathe it. It doesn't have a delayed effects. And so if you breathe in high amounts, wheezing, coughing, shortness of breath, and it makes things worse for people that have existing conditions like asthma or COPD. So that's kind of what you would say for the short-term effects, but that's not what you asked me. You asked me about the long-term effects. So again, just to reiterate here that breathing the vapors from the mists, what it can cause, again, moist tissues. Now, a lot of the studies that we've found with sulfuric acid mists are for worker exposures. They're working in a battery plant, or they're working in some other plant where they're exposed to the really high concentrations of these mists. And so most of those studies are not particularly applicable for your situation of being in the community. But we do have a study, it's an old study, but it's a good one from 1952, where they had some humans and they exposed them to up to 100 microgram per meter cubed sulfuric acid mist for a total of 4 hours. And they did not see any change in their particular lung function. So when we say changes in lung function, we mean things like changing, if there's inflammation, then you would end up getting a wheeze. You can't breathe as deeply. So that's what they saw with a study in typical humans. If you were asthmatic, if you were significantly older or younger, then that would not necessarily be the same. So you may have also heard that there's these long-term studies of workers where you get this teeth erosion, inflammation of the mouth, you know, these really awful sounding things, chronic bronchial irritation, cough, chronic shortness of breath. That's at really high levels, again, that you might find in a workplace, which are significantly higher than what you would ever see in and around Borger. So again, these studies that you may see where there's like, oh, teeth erosion, that sort of thing, you know, those are not really applicable for your situation. But when you Google or when you look up sulfuric acid mist, you might see those studies and be like, well, they're not telling me the truth. And what I'm telling you is that those studies are not applicable for you because of your low concentrations that you're exposed to relatively. So I was able to go back and find a study, which of course you can't do these kinds of studies anymore, but they took monkeys and they exposed them for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week for 18 months, except for like about an hour or two a day where they fed them. So, but they exposed these guys 24 hours a day to concentrations as low as 100 micrograms per meter cubed, all the way up to 4,800 micrograms per meter cubed. And then at the end of 18 months, they sacrificed the animals and they looked at their lung tissue and other tissues in their body. And what they reported was that they did see some small changes in the lung that were observed at the lowest dose that were exposed, but it did not see changes in their lung function. So they may have seen like a small thickening of the bronchioles, but that was not significant enough to cause a change in how much that they could breathe in. It wasn't until they got to around 500 micrograms per meter cubed of exposure that's when they started looking at finding permanent changes in lung function. So what this says, and to, just to reiterate, so continuous exposure, 18 months of sulfuric acid mist to monkeys, that levels that were 6 times greater than that TCEQ standard did not result in a decrease in lung function, so decreased ventilation or oxygen intake. And this supports that protective nature of the current TCEQ 24-hour standard of 15. So again, it was 15 is your standard for 24 hours, and the monkeys were exposed continuously for 18 months to 100 micrograms. And I also spoke with the staff, and they said that, and they confirmed that, the last presentation, and I've got this data earlier in the presentation, that when they used EPA approved air modeling software, that the model predicted the highest 24-hour concentration of hydrogen sulfide mist at ground level was only 4 micrograms per meter cubed. So that's when the pollution control unit is running, you don't see levels of sulfuric acid mist at the ground. And this is what you're seeing even if it was predicted. But it's my understanding is that you all haven't seen any, when you've done the measuring around the sites and around the community, you haven't seen any measurements of hydrogen sulfide, sulfuric acid mist. So that's what I was going, that's all I was going to present right now about the chronic exposure to sulfuric acid mists. Does anyone have any questions?
I've got a question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
So in the study with monkeys, you mentioned that there was indications of lung tissue change, even at the lower dosages. They sacrificed these monkeys to do this study. Is there any information in that study? Had they let these monkeys, instead of sacrificing, what would have been the damage to the lung tissue 5, 10, 15 years down the road?
So as I had said previously, that and I'll move up here. The amount of tissue damage depends on the strength and the concentration of the acid and the duration of exposure. So if you are exposed to a low level of sulfuric acid mist, over time, that could build up. Now, with any kind of exposure that you've got, there's what we would call a threshold. So your body is exposed to all different kinds of pollutants and gases and all sorts of things every day, and has an ability to compensate for that. And so when you look at these monkey studies, and I'll go back to the monkey study slide, monkeys do not live, these particular monkeys do not live as long as humans do. So 18 months in a monkey is not the same as 18 months in a human, because the monkey's lifespan for these particular monkeys are much shorter. So even though that this is 18 months, it actually represents a bigger portion of their life. And so it would be even more protective. The kinds of changes that you see with with acid mist exposures is cumulative. So if you start getting really high levels for a long time, that can build up. But again, there's a threshold under which your body can repair and it doesn't affect your lung function, which is that's what this means here. The small microscopic changes in their lungs were observed, but that does not correspond with changes in how efficiently they breathed or how much oxygen they were able to absorb. So did that answer your question?
I don't think so. Long-term effects for the monkeys.
So
Data which support what a
Right.
long-term exposure effect, or I believe you said earlier that pre-existing health conditions can, or age, things of that nature of our population could be exposed to this differently than a healthy person. So in this monkey study, do they know what would have happened down the road with these monkeys for the damage that was done in that 18 months? And
so yeah.
all the monkeys that they did this study on, like, were they very variety of ages? Were there young monkeys, old monkeys?
They used adult monkeys. They did not use chimpanzees. They used some of these small capuchin monkeys, which have similar physiology to humans. I've also have some long-term studies I found in guinea pigs, but that really isn't as applicable to what we were considering here. In general, if you're asking, would these long-term exposures lead to something that you wouldn't predict? So, for example, I've said that these long-term exposures, even these short-term exposures, the damage happens where it comes into the body. So it happens in the lungs, or it happens if you got it on your skin all the time. These long-term exposures are not expected to suddenly affect your liver and cause liver cancer, or your kidneys and cause kidney cancer. The sulfuric acid mist, it's a direct, so you could expect if you exceed your ability to repair the damage, that you could have cumulative type damage. So if you're asking, is this going to turn into like lung cancer? It's not expected to. Not at these levels.
Okay, so just to clarify, you're saying that NIOSH and the CDC are incorrect when they state that long-term exposure could lead to lung cancer. Are you contradicting what NIOSH and the CDC are saying?
What I'm saying is that the studies where they looked at sulfuric acid mists, they looked at those in worker populations they were exposed to concentrations significantly higher than what you would be exposed to in the community. So that those studies that looked at specifically sulfuric acid mist and looked at workplace exposures and lifetimes of workers in those that worked in those plants for 40 years, did they see an increase in mortality, death due to cancer? Yes. Was it linked to sulfuric acid mist? Probably. Was it at levels? But if it would have been sulfuric acid mist would have caused the same thing as hydrochloric acid mists, as any of these other acid mists. It's not specific to sulfuric acid mist. So no, NIOSH is not wrong, but they're talking about a different population and they're talking about different levels.
Okay, so we understand that it can cause issues at certain concentrations depending on the length of time and the acute, chronic, and the levels. I know one thing that we discussed in previous meetings is just
Wait, got to slow down a little bit. Got to slow down.
one of the things we discussed in some of our previous meetings is, going to be that worker population that's either in that plant or next door. And then we've also discussed, of course, just the chronic, 34-year exposure. So we do know that there can be issues. I think now we probably want to move on to get an update of what I know from what I understand, there's some progress as far as hopefully there's a fix coming. Is that right?
That's
so when we transition to that, we kind of discuss what that fix looks like, and then we can see any more questions.
Yeah, absolutely. So Wednesday next week, the equipment manufacturer is going to be here on site. So they come from Europe. Like I said, so the next step is for us to actually go into the unit and see what's wrong, right? So we did so this is a big unit, right? And so we already did all the external inspections that we could. So we shut the unit down Wednesday last week, right? So we're just waiting for the equipment manufacturer to come be here on site and then just review anything that needs to be reviewed, right? That's the next step, right? And so definitely we'll provide an update after we have the inspection.
I've got some questions.
Should I just come all the way up, just that way you're within range of the mics?
That would be the best. Thank you.
Okay, well, and I'm not sure, I really don't think it's that one. Some of the questions I have is about really opacity. What limit are you held to, and are you out of compliance on opacity?
Well, I think you're the long-arm director of environmental affairs. I think he's on the line, and I think he can answer that question for us. Long, are you online?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can. Did you hear the question?
Yeah, so the opacity standard right now is we believe is 15% by method 9 under TCQ. Yes, and we're currently not within that standard, and we are working with a TCQ down in Austin to come up with a resolution for that.
My other questions are, should a plant alarm be sounded when you have these opacity events?
Certainly, we do not have any alarms for this.
Okay, so then my next question would be, when you are operating, are you continuously out of compliance then for opacity?
Like I said, that's something we are working with the TCQ on to resolve, right? And so that's whether we're in compliance or not, that's determined by the TCQ.
So is the community air monitoring conducted each time you have an opacity event?
Can you clarify that question?
I think the question was, every time that there's an event, or say it's a continuous event, how often is the community monitoring being conducted?
I don't think there's any type of monitoring. I mean, to determine by that is you do what's called an EPA method 9. And so that's a manual method. Somebody would have to go out there and perform that method manually.
So my question would be, well, my question now is, do you have a continuous opacity monitoring system?
No, we do not at a stack.
So what happens if you don't find anything from internal inspection?
Well, I think Paul can answer that because we have a plan for after the inspection. So Paul would be better to answer that question.
Yeah.
So to answer the question, yes, whenever we have an event, we have a test that we have discussed, city board has decided to buy. And we can measure the sulfuric acid in the atmosphere. We have done that willingly with the TCEQ, with the city, and we do it often ourselves just to build a database.
Well, was the technology, this technology, was it not tested or approved before installing these issues?
Paul, you want to react with that one?
The technology is approved through the EPA, through the permitting. There was a very rigorous permit process and a very rigorous process with EPA, and the technology is approved by the EPA and by TCEQ.
So why is Orion not having issues with technology they installed?
I can't speak directly for Orion, but they have a different technology than we do.
Do we have any questions from the floor? If you would just step at least kind of this direction so we can pick you up in the microphone. You're welcome to come all the way up. Okay.
Are there not fixed monitors available for this, to monitor this, that could be placed in the community or around the plant?
Long, the question was around fixed monitoring devices.
Yes, we've asked, actually during our first meeting, you know, when this thing first came up, we asked members of the LPC to come up with suggestions, right? So there was a gentleman from ConocoPhillips, so I reached out to them and he talked to the environmental director. So we were looking for some type of continuous monitor. So currently we're not aware of anything that's out there where you can set up kind of like the SO2 monitors, right? Where you can continuously monitor for that concentration. SO3 is extremely difficult pollutant to test for. And so I think because of that, there are no continuous monitors that are available to that. I mean, we're open for that suggestion, but at this point, we have not found anything where you can put at a location and continuously monitor for the pollutant.
Okay, we do have a question that came in via Zoom. I'll let Jerry read that for us.
It's just Kimberly up on there. She raised her hand.
Hi, so my question is we keep talking about sulfuric acid mist, but what about the particulate matter that is being emitted by the plant? I mean, you can see it all around town. There's black particulate matter whenever kids go play outside, whenever animals go outside. That's something that we need to be concerned about too.
Okay, so I believe you're asking about the whether it's inert or not, the black residue that gets on things in the community. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and currently we do have procedures for that also, right? And as far as I know, the procedure's always been around. So if there's a neighbor complaint, then we would go out there with Orion in the past, and if it's suspected to be carbon black right now, when you're talking about black matters, in the past, it could be from many different sources. Let's say if you have a big barbecue, you can have that. Or let's say somebody has open burning, that could be caused particulate matter. Or let's say if you have a diesel truck or train, right, that sits down around for a long time. And so we follow procedures. If there's a complaint, then we go out and collect samples, and then we send it to our laboratory, and then we determine if it's indeed our product or not. If it's not, then we communicate back to the community or the plaintiff. And if it's not, then we tell them otherwise, right? Say, based on our testing, it's not our product, it's something else. So we continue to follow those procedures.
Does that mean that you are completely combusting all the carbon black in the area or that you use in the plant? Because whenever it's not completely combusted, it causes particulate matter.
That's a possibility. I mean, that's our product, right? So that's our filter. So we have bag filters that's 99.999% capturing, and then we are subject to emission limits from our permit. And so in the past, when we have performed stack tests, we have demonstrated compliance with those types of limits.
So do you have the emissions for those whenever they do that testing? Is that available to the public?
Yes, I believe so. I mean, I'll have to take a look to see when the last time we did a stack test and relative to the particulate matter standard.
And what all do you plan to monitor for other than sulfuric acid? Are you not monitoring for aerosols and particulate matter right now?
Yeah, so currently from our WSA scrubber stack, we have 2 continuous monitors. One is for the NOx and the other one is the SO2.
But you're not going to monitor anything else that could be hazardous to the population?
In terms of what we're required to monitor, that's all be determined by the TCQ when we receive the permit.
Okay, well, so you do not plan to implement any monitoring or any anything else in order to make sure that that carbon black is not entering into the community?
That's correct. I mean, like I said, as part of the permitting process, the regulatory agencies determine which pollutants are critical, and then they determine what needs to be monitored and the method that is needed. And so we don't make those determinations. The regulatory agencies do.
Okay, and do you have any plans to test soil or water in the area for degradation due to the acid rain that has been occurring for the past 30 years?
We don't have any plan. And remember, in terms of the wider area, right, within the Borger area, you're well aware that there are 6 other industrial facilities besides ours. So when you're talking about soils and water, then it wouldn't just be from Tokai Carbon, right? You have to look at the bigger picture, I would say, right? Determine
yes, but
what emissions you have and where are those and who are the contributors to those emissions and impacts of the soil and the water.
yes, but if there is degradation and it's not just you responsible, isn't that something that you should be concerned about for the population?
Yeah, that's a possibility. You know, I can't really answer to that at this point.
Can I add something, Kimberly?
Yes.
You've asked some really good questions. And it took me a while also when I was going through the data and looking at the regulations to try to sort out, you know, why are people interested in the sulfuric acid mist versus SO2 versus SO3 and how all those kinds of things work together. Because again, if you're looking, you know, the National Ambient Air Quality Standards, the NAAQS, they don't look at sulfuric acid mists the same way as, you know, TCEQ does. So TCEQ is interested specifically in this particular case with around the Borger plant. They're interested in the sulfuric acid mist. Were you here the last time that I presented?
No, I wasn't.
Okay, so if I can just go back for a minute, if we have time.
We probably have about 2 minutes on that. We've only got about 10 minutes left in our meeting.
Okay, well, then I won't do that. Let me stop this then. Okay, I would urge you to go back and take a look at the presentation that I did the last time. And if you want to make some time to go through it together, we can do that. But because the way that the pollution control unit has been implemented, the difference between pre-2021 and now in terms of the air quality, it has gone up tremendously. It's just that now you see this sulfuric acid mist coming out as part of what's coming out of the the pollution control unit. But overall, looking at the quality of the air, the amount of acid rain, those types of things, those levels are all improving so much because of what they've done with that pollution control unit.
Okay,
Warren?
Warren Chris Meyer, American Red Cross, is there any way to ablate or to mitigate this highly visible plume and perhaps capture it on site and contain it on site?
But that's the, yes.
I believe that's what y'all are working on now, correct? That's, and that's what you're talking about. The reason for the shutdown is they're going through, and I believe the manufacturer from, is it Denmark? Denmark is here on site and working with them. So that is the goal. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
You're Sarah Huff again with the Eagle Press. You said you're working with the LEPC, so I'm assuming that you're now submitting emission reports to the LEPC,
Yes, we are.
starting as of when?
Long, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we started back when we started meeting with them back in February. Emission reports, when do we start submitting those to LEPC?
Yes, I have been submitted those to TCQ Region 1.
No, I'm not talking about TCQ. I'm talking about, did you submit it to the LEPC directly?
Have we copied LEPC LOM on those reports that we have sent out to TCQ?
Like the other community industries do?
No, I think we just submitted to the TCQ in the past, but we can certainly submit to
Those guys have not
Jason.
started sending those to the LEPC like all the other community.
I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I didn't know that was a requirement, but certainly, yeah, we can.
Are you talking about the emission events?
Yes, talking about the emission bins and the other.
Sure, yeah, if we have a mission event, then I'll submit it to LEPC like the other.
And just to clarify, I believe what she's asking is when we had our first meeting, if
Yes.
I'm recalling correctly, I'm sure we can go back and watch the YouTube video, but I believe that one of the first things that was said is that we would be copied on those for transparency. So I think she's asking is, has that actually happened? Has anything actually been followed through on that?
I don't know if we had an emission event under the regulations to be reported. And so if I do, I will go ahead and report those.
So you don't know?
I can't remember if we've had any of those types of emission events.
But besides that, I think it's, correct, Tara, correct me if I'm wrong, but you just want a copy of the monitoring that we do, correct? Or when we have emissions, or I guess, what is the
I know
actual
that
ask?
there was a statement made, and I cannot quote it directly right now. I can go back and look at the recordings, but there's some things that you're not legally required to do and have not. But the other industries submit reports and work with the local emergency management teams. And you guys have not done the same thing that these other industries are doing.
Just at the record, right? So Lom, let's get with the LEPC on the meeting that we have, I guess, next Friday is our next one. So let's make sure that, whatever we're not submitting to them that other industries are doing, let's make sure that we do, and we'll do it. Absolutely.
Yeah, I understand, Sanito, that. Yeah.
Missing, but believe it wasn't
So
because we didn't.
But again,
We can go back. Yeah, absolutely. We can go back to whenever we started back. I
but
think.
we'll know that we're doing it because you said you were going to do it at the other meeting and we don't know if we've done it or not.
We can put it in the meetings. We'll share that it gets done. Absolutely.
All right.
Yes.
Okay, we have time for one more. Or is that probably? Does anybody else have anything they'd like to add briefly? All right, I think we'll move on. So we've got about 5 minutes left.
Take the time to come in and fill these questions for the LEPC and the meeting. We're gonna move on to new business. Next item on the agenda we brought up a little bit last meeting was shirts for free LEPC positions. And what we're looking at is no more than 2 shirts a year. Maximum expenditure for the year would be $300 for these shirts. The polo type shirt with our rubber logo for the LEPC positions. So bring it up for discussion and to vote on. Here's one.
Warren Crestmeyer, American Red Cross, I move that we approve the expenditure for shirt allowance for LEPC officers.
Second. Second. Okay, Bill seconds. Any further discussion? Any opposed? Motion passed. Motion carried. Then, last item on the agenda for new business is, the LEPC coordinator. To increase, the pay for that position, $700 a month. We propose to raise that to $800. That position, over the last several years, especially starting with COVID, has taken on more and more responsibility. Here recently with the meetings, organizing the meetings and all the duties of the LEPC. It's not just the one meeting a month. That position has a lot of responsibility and has always done a really good job. So,
And the last time we gave that position raise 2 years ago,
3 years. It's been 3 years. Yeah, it's been 3 years that we've raised that position. So anyway, so the proposal on the floor. We need to vote on it, make a motion, any discussion, we're welcome to have. We raised the LEPC coordinator from currently $700 a month up to $800 a month.
Move to accept.
Make a motion. Motion been made. Motion made second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried.
This only catches up with inflation, just barely.
Yes. Money will thing. Last item will be the date for our next meeting. That is June 20th. Look for everybody. Any conflicts? Either do you know if it has any conflict with that one schedule?
It should not be,
Okay.
should be good.
Everybody good with June 20th? Potentially back at the same location as dump. If there's any changes, if you have to change the date or location, Jerry will send that up. I notice. All right. There's nothing further. We'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Warren Crestmeyer, American Red Cross, I move that we adjourn.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Meeting here. Thank you guys for your time.
thank y'all for coming.
Robert.